It's a pleasure to be here. And when I listened to Angie speak just a little bit ago, I think that the fact that you're here is huge. There's such a need for support with our students. I'm going to start by telling you a story that happened about 5 years ago with said Cammie, the dog. And like I said, I've been a teacher for so many years, and it was a new experience for me when I became a student, if you will. Our Kerry Blue Terrier weighs about 48 pounds, and she is very strong and very powerful. In fact, so much so that when we tried to walk the dog, my arm was at a 45-degree angle, my shoulders would hurt at the end, she had a fierce and ferocious bark. We were terrified about what we were going to do with this dog. So we hired a trainer, and her name was Cynthia, and I grew to love her, but I was terrified about her at the very beginning. So one of the things that happened was in our front yard, we were working and practicing with the dog. Cynthia would come to our home. We needed private lessons. And this was one of the leads that she had us use for a variety of purposes. But she was just going to simply talk with us about what to do to walk the dog. So there was a special way to hold the leash. There was a special way to hold my arms. There was a special way to step out. There was a special way to make a command. Now, I have walked dogs before. It didn't seem like rocket science. But with Cynthia, she was my alpha. She made me a little nervous when I was working with her. I knew that I was not going to be able to ever figure out how to walk this silly dog, and so this is what she helped me to learn to do. When you hold the leash, you have to put your hand inside like this. You don't want to wrap it around your wrist, or you could fall and get hurt. Then you have to loop the lead, such as this, so that you have just enough of room for correction. If the dog starts to lunge, as ours like to do, you had to be able to give that quick correction. Then you also had to keep your hand at your side, because there's something, I think, other dog trainers, this energy you give off. And also, when our dog was lunging, I would also want to take my left hand, hold on to the lead to help pull her back, but I was supposed to keep that hand at my side. So 4 simple steps. Hand in the lead, grab it, hand at your side, my other hand at my side, and then we had to step off. So the dog had to be sitting, of course, before we would start, and that was another lesson. But then we had to step off with the left and say, let's go. And you would think that, oh my word, that is not so difficult, but I had to think about every single step, and nothing was automatic. And then I had this aha moment, thinking, oh my word, this is exactly what happens when students are learning to read. Nothing is automatic. Everything has to be just thought through, taken step by step by step by step. As I work with beginning teachers, it's the same kind of thing. If they stand in front of a group of students, nothing is automatic, yet they have to think through and plan ahead for every single thing. The same can be true if you are unfamiliar with reading with younger students or reading with students. It might seem a little bit terrifying. There are just things, just thinking ahead and planning ahead are helpful. So today what I'm hoping to do is to share with you the connection between working with students and working with students maybe for the first time. So as adult learners and as your audience, the children that you might be working with as you read. So, the first thing I think that you all know as you work in businesses and various places, it's all about building that relationship, feeling safe. You feeling safe with the student that you're working with, and the student feeling safe with you. And I think smiling, talking, getting to know them, making that connection. And I think that we all know it's important to know that we matter. And I think that you are going to matter to those students, and they're going to matter to you. Another thing, when you begin working with students or reading with students, I heard an expert say just know just a little bit more than they do, and you can lead them forward. So that gently nudging, you can't, there's so much to learn, you just have to take them where they are and just gently scaffold and gently push them and nudge them forward. So taking the time to building that relationship, making connections, what do you have in common? As a teacher of reading, there are 5 important components. We call them the 5 pillars of reading. And today, what I hope to share with you are just basic outline of what those mean and what they'll mean to you as you work with students. And as you read aloud with students, if you choose to participate with America Reads. But as Angie was saying, we have so many students that have different experiences maybe than what we had when we grew up. I grew up learning to read on the lap of my mother. She read to me, she talked to me, she explained things to me, she pointed things out to me. And many of our homes, for a variety of reasons, have difficulty with that. Many of our students, as they enter school, do not have the vocabulary, the word knowledge that many of you might have had as you entered kindergarten or entered your primary years. And so reading aloud to a child is just critical. Taking a look at the cover of the book, talking about what do you think this might be about? Can you make any connections to the story? Predicting what kinds of words might we find in this book. Oh, I think this book is about a train. I know, oh, I wonder if I'm going to read about a caboose or an engineer. Just getting that brain activated, building that prior knowledge. What do they already know? Because if that prior knowledge is in the brain, then they can grab onto that instead of having the new information slip off like Teflon, I like to say. So stopping and talking about those words as you read can just do wonderful things for students. Comprehension is huge. There are so many things that, as a reader, if you stop and think about what happens when you read, likely all kinds of things are happening in your mind. You're visualizing, you have images, you have little movies in your mind as the author's words come across the page. You're making inferences where you're thinking, oh, if she has this red face, then she must be feeling angry. Or you might be wondering, you might be questioning, you might be thinking, oh, what's most important about this? And when working with students, we cannot ever assume that they know that those kinds of conversations go on in the mind. And so as a volunteer, you get to think aloud. Research supports the power of that thinking aloud with students, telling them what's going on in your mind, and then asking or inviting them to be thinking, oh, are you wondering about anything when you read this page? Or what is it that, does this remind you of anything? Or do you have any questions? Or what do you think is most important? Also that, thank you, also that power of predicting. What do you think is going to happen next? Getting them to be engaged in the story, that's pretty critical and key. So this can be true as you're reading with a child, reading to a child, but also if you're working with a student, if your role is going to be to volunteer to support a student as they learn to read, just taking the time to have those conversations as they read and as you work to help them. Another component important in learning to read is being able to hear the sounds. We call it, it's a fancy word, phonemic awareness or phonological awareness. But truly what it is just hearing sounds. If you think back to your children, your grandchildren, you yourself sitting on your mother's lap or with your grandmother reciting nursery rhymes, patty cake, peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot. 9 days old, I think that's how it goes. The power of that, the rhythm of the language, the sounds of the language, it's critical for this step to be in place before anything can happen when children learn to read. So if you're working with young students, ABC books, nursery rhymes, poems, chants, anything like that is just a great tool to use if you're tutoring the student or just reading aloud to the student. I mentioned alliteration, hearing those similar sounds at the beginning of the words, making the sounds fun for them. Let's see if we can make up some silly sentences. And then clamping the parts of words. Think about the word bicycle. Let's see if we can hear all the parts in this. Let's clap that. Bicycle, sandwich, or stomping, or just getting them up and moving and doing some activities like that. And this is primarily for students that are in kindergarten and first grade if you should happen to work with students of that age. Phonics. You hear about phonics a lot in the news, and phonics is very, very important, and it's simply that letter-sound correspondence. Working with young readers, again, ABC books, simple books, going on letter hunts. Can you find the C on this page? Can you find the B? Let's see if we can find the letter T at the end of that word. And again, those poems, rhymes, and chants. And the beauty of poems is sometimes, and the simpler the poem, the better with those early readers. A lot of times that ending word has a rhyme, and you can look at how the at might rhyme with cat and fat, and look how those two letters are the same at the end of the line. And again, continuing with phonics, I remember working with volunteers in the past, and when a child would come to a word that they're not sure about, that you probably have said this before, just sound it out. Nod your head if you've used those words before, just sound it out. Well, sounding it out is a great strategy, but there are ways to break that down, and I have a handout that I believe Marsha's going to pass out in a little while, but there are some strategies for sounding out that I think might help you hook into what you might do and say with students when you're working with them.
You already have that handout, that's the one we just passed out.
Okay, thank you.
Look at that.
As you're reading with students, and this is primarily if you are actually tutoring students, just use the picture. Pictures have all kinds of clues that you can use. So if a child stumbles on a word, you can look at the picture, see if there's something that can activate their mind with that. Take a look at the beginning letter. Look, that's a picture of a train. See, that word starts with train. That probably would make sense there. So using the picture as a clue, that's an important thing to do. We call stretching out the word, which is actually a lot like what's sounding out by B, but if the word is cat, and really saying it slowly and stretching it out like the neck of a giraffe or a rubber band. Another strategy you might use is just hop over a word. If students come to a word that is tricky and you think it's a word that they can tackle, you can say go ahead and hop over it, and maybe you'll get clues at the end of the sentence and come back and use the word. Or sometimes simply just tell them the word as well. That's okay too once in a while. Cut the word into smaller pieces. Look at it in chunks. Again, using that beginning sound or the ending sound or chunking that word into parts. And I remember when I was in second grade, the word comfortable, I had this revelation that I figured out how to read the word comfortable. It was the longest word I'd ever read, but I could just take it into those little chunks. And having the child cover it up, you help to cover up those little pieces to help them take it one chunk at a time. Another strategy is to go back and take a running start. Once they come to a word that's a tricky word, let's go back and let's just try it again. And they get the momentum and maybe some of that meaning behind the sentence and that initial letter clue can help them. And the final component that I'm going to talk about with you is what we call fluency. And reading fluency, when we think about it in the context of reading, is can they read the words accurately on the page? Is there rate? Not word by word rate. That's very annoying when I do that. But, not a word by word rate, but a rate that's going to help make meaning. And phrasing, and also using expression as well. And this is the power of the tutor and the volunteer. We rely on you to model that and to help them and to support them in that way. Because chances are, if your role is going to be to support a beginning reader, you are going to hear a lot of reading just like that. And so there are a couple strategies I'd just like to share with you, and they're on the handouts as well so that you can refer to them as you work with students. But choral reading, the two of you side by side reading together, you just a split second ahead of them so that they can listen and model in, and just model and follow with you, choral reading the piece. The power of repeated reading, reading the same sentence again and again, or the same paragraph, or the same book again and again, will help to develop not only that sight word knowledge, but they can become more, they just see it more times they'll get better at it. I love the strategy of echo reading. You read it the way, and be very purposeful about it. We're going to do some echo reading today. I'm going to read the piece. I want you to listen to how I say it. I'm going to slide my finger, and I'm going to ask you to repeat it back the same way I do. And so that echoing back and forth, and they hear your model and practicing that. And I like to use the phrase smooth and bumpy when working with students. So if they are reading in a choppy way, I just put up my arm, and if you read that in a choppy way, just kind of use that bumpy. Let's see if we can read smoothly. Let's try it smooth. That was bumpy. Let's try it smooth. And then a lot of times with students, we'll just use that cue. That was smooth, and they seem to like that. And finally, I'm just going to leave you with this quote. I think you can read that. So I thank you for being in this room, because certainly we have a great task ahead of us to support our students so that they can get where they need to go. Graduating from high school, graduating from college, being productive members. But I can guarantee you that when you work with students, when you work with those children, you are the person that's going to be going places, because they're just going to take you on a journey that's just so much fun and so very rewarding. So thank you very much for all you do for our students.